I just wanted to mention the connection and the passion our respected ulama of Deoband had with the Qur'an and the passion and zeal they had of explaining the Qur'an and connecting the whole of humanity with the Qur'an. The first tafsir that I'm going to mention is the tafsir of Hakim al-Ummah Man Ashraf Tanwi rahimahullah, which is titled Bayan al-Qur'an. And before I mention that, I just remembered that a scholar called Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi rahimahullah, who was a student of Shaykh al-Hind rahimahullah, he was somebody who was involved in the mission of keeping the Islamic system, which at that time was the Ottoman Caliphate, alive, and if that could not be kept alive, to make sure he spreads the Islamic system throughout the world. And he lived in exile for 19 years, and he went to Russia. He even spoke to Lenin, and wherever he went, he always taught the Qur'an, the tafsir. Such was his passion. And over the years, different people compiled his tafsir. So as a side note, at times certain things are attributed to him, but we have to accept them with caution, because it was different students taking his tafsir. However, certain scholars did gather some of his tafsir. In one collection, the thing I want to share with you, where he mentions that one scholar we all must have heard of is Shah Waliullah rahimahullah, Shah Waliullah Dahlawi. He's a scholar who's well known, not only in the Muslim world, but even in the non-Muslim world. I've come across many translations by non-Muslims of his works. So Shah Wali rahimahullah, he mentions Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi. He was somebody who was known to be a person who really understands the ilm, the knowledge that Shah Waliullah rahimahullah wanted to impart to the masses. So he said that most of us understand, have taken on board and appreciated the kind of academic side of Shah Waliullah rahimahullah. But the second elements and side of Shah Waliullah rahimahullah we haven't taken on board was his inqilabi side, which means his side of revolution. So Shah Wali rahimahullah, he never just wrote works on the Qur'an and tafsir, just works. His objective was to revolutionize the world, which he did. His whole idea was to change the world through his works. It wasn't just he wrote really good works. His other main underlying objective was to create a revolution within the people. He goes, this secondary element we are missing. And another great scholar who spent a lot of his life in Pakistan discussing and explaining the tafsir of the Qur'an was a scholar called Mona Aslam Sheikhupuri rahimahullah. An amazing scholar who I'm greatly influenced by. And he mentions that if the lessons of the Qur'an were imparted throughout the world in a manner that is more common than now, this will change the world. The Qur'an has the capability of changing the world. And in one of his works, he mentions, these scholars were such people who had insight into the modern affairs, and they gained great guidance because they were looking at the words of Allah in light of the words of Allah of the modern affairs. So he quoted this individual whose name was Edward Dennis Ross, and this person was a Orientalist and linguist. When I say linguist, I don't mean like, you may think he knew 6-7 languages. This individual knew 49 languages, and he spoke at least 30 of them. So he was a highly academic individual. And he has a work on Islam, and in there he mentions, and this is where his quote is from, that this idea that Islam spread through the sword is an incorrect idea. In reality, Islam spread due to its simplicity, and meaning the main message, the message of the Qur'an is a very simple one. It's a very simple one, hence why it has the ability to change people's lives. The message is very simple. So we need to be on, especially those who are studying, those who are in the path of deen and want to be of service to deen, they need to have this element of inqilab, which means to create a revolution, and the best thing you can use to do that is through the teachings of the Qur'an. So the first scholar was Ashraf Than rahimahullah, who wrote a book called Tafsir called Bayan al-Qur'an. This was another game changer, Bayan al-Qur'an, because the many tafasir that came after him were influenced directly or indirectly by this work. Now this work is not an extensive work, it's a short work, but its meaning, its value, it's a very comprehensive work. And just like this work was another work known as Tafsir Uthmani, which was written by two great scholars. One was Shaykh al-Hind rahimahullah, and one was Maulana Shabir Ahmad Uthmani rahimahullah. Now both these works were very short, but very comprehensive in meaning. That's why a scholar who summarized Bayan al-Qur'an, he mentions that his father, Maulana Anwar Badakhshani, a famous scholar who summarized many works, he said, my father and other teachers will always mention that you can only appreciate what value these two commentaries of the Qur'an have, Tafsir Uthmani and Bayan al-Qur'an, once you have an extensive reading of the other major works of tafsir. So we see in these, when we normally hear about Ashraf Than rahimahullah and Shaykh al-Hind rahimahullah, we have other things in mind, maybe the politics side or maybe the spiritual side. But in reality, a large part of their life was trying to explain the Qur'an and connect people with the Qur'an. The three major works were influenced by Bayan al-Qur'an. One of them is Ma'arif al-Qur'an by Mufti Shafi Uthmani rahimahullah, and it is probably the most accepted Urdu tafsir in the world, is Ma'arif al-Qur'an. And I think ChatGPT agrees with me. Yesterday I just searched just to see what results I get. The first search result was very disappointing. End of the day, it's a tool. You can use it, you can misuse it, you can use it properly. The first search I just put forward, I said, mention the best tafsirs in Urdu. And the first answer was the Qadiani tafsir. So I was like, the question is Muslim, Islam, and answer is kufr. But anyhow, I did ask, pick the best one, and he said Ma'arif al-Qur'an. But anyhow, we don't need ChatGPT to verify this. It's something well known. It's the most accepted Urdu tafsir in the world. And this tafsir was obviously, it was influenced by the Bayan al-Qur'an of Hakim rahimahullah. Another tafsir is with a similar name is Ma'arif al-Qur'an of Maulana Idris Khandalwi rahimahullah. Now this tafsir was also influenced by Bayan al-Qur'an, and the amazing thing about, especially of ulama of Deoband, was that just like at times they'd be quoting the Qurtubi and the Razi, these other works, very academic works. At the same time, they would be quoting Allama Rumi and all these other giants in the realm of spirituality. And a third work that was influenced by Bayan al-Qur'an was Tafsir Majidi by Mullah Abdul Majid Deobandi. Of course, some tafsirs, we kind of have reservations about them in certain elements, but that happens. But this is still a very good tafsir. And one of the Majid Deobandi, we don't have time to go into his life, he was a very interesting individual, but he was somebody who spent a large portion of his life studying philosophy and these Western philosophy and ideas and so on. He was deeply involved in the sciences, and he also, at one point, Allah protect us, left Islam. And one of the main individuals who he later on wrote, he has his autobiography called his Abiti, his autobiography, which is must read. He mentions in there, the person I was influenced by the most was this first scholar I mentioned, who had a deep connection with the Qur'an, was Maulana Ashraf Than rahimahullah. So someone like that who was, who left Islam, who studied this philosophy and impacted his iman, and for many years he was all over the place, existential crisis. The person that brought him back was Maulana Ashraf Than rahimahullah, and his tafsir played a large part in this. The Qur'an played a large part in this journey. Another scholar that I would like to mention is Maulana Allama Sarfaraz Safdar rahimahullah. His lessons of the Qur'an have recently published, and we have these books in our Masjid Mahmud library. Is over 20 volumes. And the level of connection he had with the Qur'an and this mission of connecting people with the Qur'an was such that his son Maulana Zahid Rashid rahimahullah mentions that he had 4 different sessions of the tafsir. 4 different sessions of his time will go. One was the lesson he used to give after Fajr prayer in the masjid. That was one session. He used to have another session in a hall of a school, which used to impart the lessons of the Qur'an to the professional audience, the professionals. The third session he used to have was in his madrasa, for advanced students. And every year from Sha'aban to Ramadan, he will go over the whole Qur'an. So 4 different sessions he will have related to the Qur'an. It was just zeal and passion to connect people with the Qur'an. And the connection was such that one scholar called Maulana Qari Abdul Bari, he was somebody who used to also give lectures of the Qur'an in his masjid. And on one occasion, he couldn't understand the connection certain ayat had in the Qur'an. So he was in that thought process and he fell asleep. When he fell asleep, he said that he saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his dream. And he saw Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. And he said that when he saw these 2 individuals, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he saw him and saw Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ explained the verses to him in the connection. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to him that if you want to understand, if there's any other difficulty you have in the Qur'an, then approach this same individual who used to have 4 different sessions of the Qur'an. Allama Safta rahimahullah, he goes, approach him. So that scholar woke up. When he woke up, he was happy that he saw the Prophet, but at the same time, he was upset that the dream ended. So he tried going to sleep again, and he did manage to fall asleep. The second time he fell asleep, he saw this same scholar, Allama Safta rahimahullah, in his dream, who explained the connection to him as well. And later on, he went and bought the cassette of the recordings of the lessons of Allama Safta rahimahullah. And when he reached that verse, it was the exact same explanation he gave in his dream. So this is only due to, you can imagine, the deep connection Allama Safta rahimahullah had with the Qur'an and wanting to emanate its teachings to the masses. Another tafsir was by his brother, Sufi Abdul Hamid rahimahullah. This is also 20 volumes tafsir. And this was the individual, and the first volume just covers the first surah, Surah Al-Fatiha. And this is somebody who spent his whole life emanating and imparting the lectures of the Qur'an in the masjid. 20 volumes, subhanAllah. Another scholar, and finally, one scholar I wanted to mention is Mufti Sa'id Palanpuri rahimahullah. Mufti Sa'id Palanpuri rahimahullah, his tafsir known as Hidayat al-Qur'an, an amazing work, a work I'm greatly influenced by. And this is somebody who spent 55 plus years of his life teaching Qur'an, Hadith, all the different sciences, and wrote thousands of pages in these sciences. Highly acclaimed works. And then towards the end of his life, he sat down with all that knowledge and experience behind him. He sat down and he wrote this tafsir of the Qur'an. And one amazing aspect of Mufti Sayyid Palanpuri rahimahullah was how he was able to really simplify issues. One scholar, Mufti Abdul Rauf Ghaznavi rahimahullah, hafidhahullah, he mentions that I've traveled through different parts of the world, started with different scholars, and there was no one like Mufti Sayyid Palanpuri rahimahullah in simplifying difficult issues. And when I read, similarly, whenever I get stuck and trying to understand, I always go to his tafsir, and most of the times he's explaining in such a way where all the misunderstandings go away. And just finally, I wanted to mention that a related lesson to the success of Mufti Sayyid Palanpuri rahimahullah. And this was an individual who even currently now in India, where you could say there is a lot of anti-Islam things going on. It's unimaginable what is going on there. Even amongst this turmoil, he received the presidential award. He received the president. You can imagine, the influence and impact this individual must have had, that in a crisis, ongoing crisis against Muslims in this day and age, he received the presidential award. This was his influence and his impact he had on the society. So this is finally on the end on a lesson for all of us, is that Somebody once said to his father that you are very lucky to have such a son who's done such an amazing work. And then he wanted to know the secret. And the secret was of how his father was very particular in avoiding haram and doubtful food, or things that are haram and doubtful. And he then goes on to mention that when he was studying, he had a dispute with his father, meaning Mufti Sayyid Palanpuri's grandfather. And the dispute was over the decision of taking interest loan. So because of this difference of opinion, the father kicked him out of the house. And because he was kicked out of the house, he had to leave studying because he no longer had the means, he no longer had his father's support. So he had to leave studying, and then he said that even if I have to live a difficult life, I will not go against the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with this sacrifice that he made, that he was able to, from his progeny came such an amazing individual like Mufti Sayyid Palanpuri rahimahullah, which is a big lesson for all of us. That when it comes to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should make the sacrifice. We should learn how to sacrifice things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only then will we see amazing benefits and help Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah give us this connection to the Qur'an and help us make us inspired by these scholars that have been mentioned.